ago, Commissioner Adam Silver is presiding over the NBA Finals. 5 years now.
Hard to believe.
5 years, and 4 of the same matchup, which is amazing. Yeah. I want to get right into the end of the game controversy at Game 1, particularly the block charge call. I think most fans who have been paying attention now are now well acquainted with the rule on that, the trigger, the review, etc. My question for you is, what consideration do you give to the digestibility of the whole play for fans, not only in the arena but on TV, when you create these rules? And I understand the end goal is to get it right, obviously, but there's confusion in the arena and certainly at home as well, as people are saying, wait, they did what? They reviewed what and arrived at what?
Well, it's a relatively recent rule.
Yeah.
It's about 5 years old, and so I understand some people weren't familiar with it, but it's really your initial point. It's a balance between, finality when a call is made and getting it right. And I think I understand the criticism of people. It's confusing and what happened, but then the other side of the coin is, you can imagine. I mean, of course, there were several plays that then and events that transpired after that call. But if that hadn't happened and Cleveland had won that game, then we would have spent the time between Game 1 and Game 2 watching slow motion replays of that call and saying it was a block, it was a block. Yeah. And we would have, as a league, been asked for our opinion on that call. We have our last 2-minute reports, and we would have said the refs got it wrong on the floor. Yeah. And so it's always that balance. I mean, the players can speak to this, and whether we've calibrated it in the right place in terms of the right amount of replay, I'm never sure. I mean, I think, when you have a rule like that, which is only in place in the last 2 minutes of the game or in overtime, that just makes the point that you don't want throughout the game to be stopping and going to replay. And I'll say, even on replay, I mean, I'll let the experts speak to it. Block charge is probably one of the most difficult calls in basketball. Yeah. And then you add slow motion replay on top of that. But I will say that, at least according to our experts at the league office, once they then saw it and had the benefit of 14 cameras, slow motion and replay, they said it was a block.
Right, and I think most people agree on that point. Eventually, what we got was the right call, a block call. Speaking of LeBron James, I mentioned 4th straight year of this matchup. He's been in the finals all 5 of your years as the commissioner now. And as you know, we've got a LeBron free agency summer upcoming when he could potentially change the balance of power in one conference or the other. As a league, is there any special preparation to be made for a LeBron summer?
No. I'll just say on behalf of LeBron, I mean, thank you. I mean, it's amazing what he does day in and day out at 33 years old, the condition he's in, the amount of preparation, what he's done to his body. I mean, we've all watched the transformation. I don't say in terms of the summer, as I've said before, we have a collective bargaining agreement. You earn, and he deserves the right to be a free agent, and he'll do what he does, and we'll adjust accordingly.
The one thing every self-help book I've ever read says, put down your 5-year plan. What's going to happen in 5 years? And as a commissioner for the NBA, what are we going to look forward to 5 years from now that we aren't seeing today in the NBA?
Well, it's you guys all have your phones on the table here, if the camera can see them, and I think these have changed the world. I mean, I'm not even sure you call them a phone anymore. It's a little computer sitting here.
Without question.
And increasingly, it's changed our business. It's transformed it because it allows people all over the world now to be watching a high-quality video of this series. I mean, when we add it all up at the end of this regular season playoffs, over 1 billion people will have watched a portion of an NBA game, and it's really because of these devices. And at the same time, there's a lot of disruption in the U.S. market in terms of cable. A lot of the young fans either cut the cord or never subscribe to cable. They're getting their television, their video through different sources, through broadband, through cellular connections on phones, and I think we're going to have to adjust accordingly. And one thing I've learned, I mean, to think that these iPhones are only 10 years old, and that 5 years is a long time from a technology standpoint in this day and age, and it's almost completely unpredictable where we are. So I just think, like, I feel good in that we have fantastic premium content. I mean, I think if you look what's happening in the media landscape, it feels like, that old expression, content is king. It feels like premium content is winning, and that we just got to keep sort of abreast of all those developments and make sure that we're taking our games to whatever platform it is that people want to watch their video.
When you talk about, big data, and you talk about, AI and what's going to happen to our game, you've also taken on the responsibility of not only introducing our game globally, but also introducing culture globally in terms of, you know, the equality that you promote in our game, the gender equality, the racial equality, and you've gone out of your way to make a stand on that front and introducing our game globally, and not only that, but also infusing it into the data and the big data that's approaching. Why have you taken that stand, and how do you continue to infuse it?
You know, Isaiah, I'll just start by saying I'm sitting with 3 NBA greats, and I think I take my lead from the players and from the history of this league. You know, we talked about it when we were all together in LA for the All-Star game when Bill Russell was there with us, and we think that he was there standing, you know, at the Lincoln Memorial with Dr. King for his I Have a Dream speech in 1963, and, you know, whether it's Oscar Robertson, you know, other great players that came before you guys, and I think I'm carrying on a tradition in this league, and I view it as more based on values than politics and culture, as you said, but I think it's always been part of the DNA of this league. Now, LeBron, Chris Paul, Carmelo, others have picked up that mantle, and I think, frankly, it's wonderful to see, and that, you know, as I've said before, I mean, the last thing I think we should be doing is sticking to sports. Only because, and that's not a business judgment on my part, it's that it's incredible the impact that sports has had and will have in our society, and that, you know, but it can be used as for such a positive force to build bridges, to bring people together, and I think that's what we're seeing in this league right now.
Yeah. Adam, shifting gears, the Supreme Court overturned the decision ruling on gambling, and you have been a proponent of that in the NBA. I think one of the concerns a lot of people have is protecting the integrity of the game as it's implemented eventually down the road. But you have an opinion, I think, where you feel it brings sort of greater transparency and will actually improve the integrity of the game. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so precisely that, and I'd say I view myself less as a proponent of sports betting than a realist, in that there's a huge multi-$100 billion business right now just in the United States of illegally betting on sports. And to your point about the transparency, the view is that now that it's legal and it can be regulated, and Isaiah, you mentioned big data before, and you can look at the data, you can see if there's aberrational activity, you can see, because people are betting, frankly, on their smartphones in this day and age, not at betting windows like that used to be in Europe at the soccer games, but it's all moved to, you know, to devices. And that if you see that people are doing things unusual, you can track it. If there's unusual trends, frankly, if people are betting excessive amounts, you can cut them off. And we can ensure that if there's something unusual that's happening, we can investigate. And whether it's a pattern of particular teams or, frankly, officials or anything else. Right now, we're in the dark. I mean, and we had a scandal 8 years ago or so in this league, and other than the FBI picking it up on a wiretap, frankly, we had no idea. And so I think, like in most areas of society, even on the cultural things we're talking about, transparency has been a positive force, and I think it'll be the same thing here.
We've got the draft coming up in a couple of weeks. You just had 100 players who test the waters go back to school. We're also on a path toward a 1-to-1 ratio of NBA to G League teams right now, as you know. Is there any thought to expanding the draft to a 3rd or 4th round to try to populate those G League teams in a way that works for ownership and puts players on a track to learn their team system?
That's a great question. We've thought about it, and we've had some very, very preliminary discussions with the Players Association about that. Of course, it would have to be collectively bargained.
Sure.
It's interesting, even now, 80% of the NBA players, I think this number is right, were drafted. So there's only 20% of the players in this league that weren't, and we only have a 2-round draft. So it's pretty remarkable. I mean, drafting is pretty good at the end of the day in terms of recognizing who the better players are. But as more players are emerging from around the world, 25% of our league right now of players who come from outside the United States, it may make sense to add a round in the draft. And it's a trade-off, because to the extent that you've added around in the draft, from a player standpoint, and a player, let's say the Warriors are so deep, and then they have additional players on their G League roster, if they are controlled by the Warriors, that next great player may not be able to move to another team and actually play because the Warriors. So it's a trade-off, and you also, from an overall league standpoint, you want that next tier of great player who's demonstrated, maybe matured or got better or for whatever reason, that wasn't predicted to be a great player in the draft. You want them available to go to the team that needs them the most. So it's this is a trade-off there.
If you're a point guard on a G League team now, you don't want to be here at Golden State stuck behind Steph Curry.
Well,
right?
and speaking of Steph Curry, I know you're a very busy guy during the NBA Finals, obviously. We paused this show before every finals game to watch Steph Curry warm up all the way to the tunnel.
Beautiful.
Do you ever get the chance to just sit and watch this?
You know, I haven't. I've watched it on television. I haven't had the chance to just watch it in person, but it's quite incredible. And you know what's amazing to me, and you guys as shooters, that he's so slight and he's small, and the power of the, like, I think I would be like full. I mean, just to reach.
Yeah.
Well, shooters
like get the ball there.
Wait a minute, Adam. I thought he was small. I thought he was my size.
Oh no, he's 6'3".
And then I stood next to him.
6'3".
He's not slight.
Well, but no, I mean, but he's not
deep.
No.
He's not a big muscled guy, and it's like the power that comes from his core, whatever else, and that accuracy to shoot. And even now, and he regularly is 6, 7 feet behind the 3-point line and flicks them up there.
Yeah.
I mean, he may be the best shooter of all time, right?
Absolutely. He's definitely stretched the imagination of the distance that you can be able to shoot from accurately.
Right.
You know, I bet if you asked, you could probably get a good seat to check out the tunnel shot.
I can see him from here.
Oh, you know what? I think they'd even let you throw the pass.
No.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Appreciate the time. As always, good to talk to you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here.
Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, is we continue here on Game Time live from the 2018